President of the United States, Tim Walz.
Hello, I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for joining me here at NewsNation. It's another historic moment together tonight. Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, is Kamala Harris's choice as her VP running mate. The Democrats think they took a step towards winning, and the right thinks it's a leap to the left. So what do you think? Let's get after it. Overwhelmingly, Democrats call Walz a good choice, or at least a safe choice to me. Now, those two mean very different things to me, and they both warrant our attention. First, here's what works with Walz. He's a governor. He's popular, certainly more so than Harris or Biden or Trump or Vance in his state. He's over 50%. He's a veteran. He has a teaching and farming background. He's a 60-year-old Midwestern white male who has a compelling personal story that involves traditional Americana. He's well-versed in fixing cars. Videos like the one that hopefully they'll put up here, which has him scolding a car maker, Chevy, I think, for maybe it was Ford, I don't know, but for a bad part. And then he tells you how to fix it and how much it'll cost. It's a marketable commodity, certainly for guys like me. And he also has a great connection to a major issue, the need for reproductive rights that were taken from women, as he and his wife used IVF to conceive their two children. Now, as I've said, if women make their witness in this election, Trump is in trouble. So Walz is measured, likable if not well known, knows politics and policy, served in several offices in state and federal office many years. The knock, he's a radical lefty, radical as Harris. He said one person's socialism is another's neighborliness. Now that can be twisted. But the attacks are going to take some effort, as we heard from Trump's lap and attack dog, J.D. Vance, today.
My view on it is it just highlights how radical Kamala Harris is. This is a person who listened to the Hamas wing of her own party and selecting a nominee. This is a guy who's proposed shipping more manufacturing jobs to China, who wants to make the American people more reliant on garbage energy instead of good American energy, and has proposed defunding the police just as Kamala Harris does.
Now, it's not about the points that he makes. Hold it there. I make those slights because he's a hypocrite, because he changed what he really believed so he could get elected. That's just the truth. He can explain it any way he wants, but only one thing changed. He needed to win that three-way race. Trump backed him, and now this is who he is. That's the choice the right made. You're also going to hear that Walz allows migrants free health care. But that and most of his policies, you may like them, you may not, but they're in line with most Democrats. The big flashpoint was his leadership in the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. He took heat for being too soft and too hard. He opposes fracking. He wanted his state to be 100% clean energy. But by 2050, I'm not sure how giving it 25 years is radical. But the right is going to try, and that's their job. To be sure, he's tougher to pick on than Vance or Trump. Minnesota is his state, not a battleground. But supporters say that he could help with the blue wall in the Midwest and conserve the VP role on the ticket of throwing punches without seeming like a cheap shot artist. He is clearly his own man, but he is also clearly not a threat to upstage Harris, which is always a concern on a ticket, but maybe is especially so here because you have a woman at the head of the ticket and you got to think about gender politics. Now I should stop and go to a panel and get their take. The left is going to say this helps Harris win. The right's going to say it makes it a radical ticket. And there will be passing references to Governor Shapiro, Senator Kelly, maybe even Governor Whitmer of Michigan, and how they each and all have bright futures but weren't right for this. And that takes me to what the word safe means, and to a conversation I've been warned to either not have or to be very careful about. And that is why we must have it, because I don't play safe. Look, Trump picked a rabid righty because that's what he does. That's what his party likes. MAGA, muffin top kissers. The Democrats tell us they will be better. So let's look at it that way. If Walz was the safe choice, what does safe mean? Safe can mean Walz has no big negatives for Democrats, balances the ticket, has a black woman at the top, and with what Americans are used to seeing, a slightly older, he's only 60, white male. Does that bother you when I define safe that way, that you needed the white guy to balance out a black woman? Remember, no one thought it would be Walz when this started. Senator Kelly polled highest, then came Shapiro, then Whitmer. So why wasn't it Whitmer? Not safe? Conventional wisdom is 2 women on the ticket is too much. Not safe. Does that sit well with you? Should it? So let's address the big elephant in the room, and it happens to be wearing a yarmulke. Why not Shapiro? He was trotted as the favorite. And you saw why at the rally in Philly today.
Tim Walz is a great man. Tim Walz is an outstanding governor. Tim Walz is a teacher. Tim Walz is a guardsman. Tim Walz is a great patriot. I'm going to be working my tail off to make sure we make Kamala Harris and Tim Walz the next leaders of the United States of America.
Crowd absolutely was cheering loudest for him. He is a very popular governor. It's his state. It was in Pennsylvania. It was in Philly, all right? He's certainly much more popular, and, well, he's as popular in state as Walz is in Minnesota. He's much better known, okay? And he's in a much more important state, Pennsylvania. It's a swing state, and it has a very mixed population, okay? Shapiro's approval rating, all right, as Pennsylvania governor is 56%. And Walz is there, too. They're both very popular guys, okay? And this is important. So let's keep looking. Let's keep looking at what this means. He's a good talker. He's smart. He's straightforward. And he is in an important swing state. Democrats need Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes more than Minnesota's 10, especially when the Democrat has won all but once since the 1970s in Minnesota. So, what makes Shapiro less safe? Did Harris not like him? Is it that he's too good? Maybe he would upstage Harris. Is it that when vetted, there was a Me Too allegation against an aide that some think Shapiro helped cover up? If that's what it was, then why was he considered at all? That wasn't a news story. Why is he such a big piece at the rally if that's what it was? So let's get more controversial than even that. Is it his position on Israel? The right certainly wants you to think so. Certainly wants you to think that Harris is weak on Israel, and certainly Jewish voters, traditionally overwhelmingly Democratic, are upset by the left wing of the Democratic Party's acidic takes on Israel, and some on the left going as far as to put Hamas, the terror group, on equal footing with a key ally. The left flank called Shapiro Genocide Josh. Is that why Harris didn't pick Shapiro? Is she catering to her far left flank? The right wants you to believe that, but I don't know. Walz supports Israel and supports all the same things as Shapiro, it would seem. And the left flank that's anti-Israel, they're not going to vote for Trump, are they? And I don't think they're going to determine the election in all likelihood. Even if you think all of those voters are young and minority, do we know that they're going to vote on the Middle East above all the other issues? Polls don't help on that. So why did they come at Shapiro? Well, arguably, he's a more aggressive and assertive supporter of Israel than Walz. And do you know why that is? Because he's Jewish. So, was Governor Shapiro passed over because he's a Jew? Would it be safe to put a Jewish VP with a black woman and ask for middle Americans to vote for them? Or is that asking too much? Unsafe. What does history tell us? Al Gore picked Joe Lieberman in 2000. Lieberman was a moderate. Hard to argue that he hurt that ticket. First Jewish nominee for vice president. Al Gore was not a black woman. These are different times. So here's my thing. Let's do it through the lens of me, okay? I'll be the guinea pig. I don't know what bothers me more. Deep in my gut. To think that Democrats decided it was not a safe bet if you want to win to have a Jewish man on the ticket with Harris, Oh, and telling me that Harris's husband is Jewish, yes, he is, I know that. It's not the same thing to me as having the VP be Jewish. It's not, oh, we already have a Jewish guy. What, because she's married to one? So what bothers me more, that they think that's the right choice or that I think they made the right call? And as you know, I believe America is nothing without her diversity. It is our secret sauce. And the more our institutions look like the country, not exaggerated to the majority or minority, but reflective of both in proportion, the better. And I respect the historic nature of a black woman at the top of the ticket. I think it matters. Should it be dispositive? Of course not. Will it win the election? I don't know. It could just as easily lose it because that's what safe really means. I see value in a ticket that has a double minority demographic, but maybe it is unsafe. When I talk with black and Jewish friends, black and Jewish colleagues, black and Jewish politicos, black and Jewish Democrats, party people, they all kind of default to acknowledging that it would be dicey to have a black woman and a Jewish man on the same ticket. Some Jews are even relieved that it wasn't Shapiro. Instead of feeling pride, they fear increased anti-Semitism in a way they have never felt before, certainly here in America. And sadly, I get it. And I hate that they feel like that. And I am here to defend Jewish Americans as with all minorities. We are one family or we are nothing. I wonder if avoiding the risk of not being safe, is that how you get better? Should the Democrats default to doing what's safe because that's how you win? Or do you take that on and refuse to play safe if playing safe means playing to prejudice? Wouldn't that make the Democrats better? Or is there a reason that I'm not the politically astute Cuomo? I'm not the one who was successful in that business. That this is magical thinking, it's romantical thinking, it's not realistic. And that while I may see that that would be better in some way, that the reality is it would only be better for Trump because it would make it more likely he would win. So I get why Harris picked Walz. I think he's got his own virtues and value to that party. And I get why Democrats like the pick. And it may well be the reason they win if they win this election. But I wonder if the really important part of this moment is who was not picked and why. And what that says, not so much about the Democrats, but about our country. Let's discuss. If the Democrats want to win, did they make the right move today? Let's bring in Democratic Representative from Massachusetts, Jake Auchincloss, also Jewish. First, do you like Governor Walz of Minnesota?
Thanks for having me on, Chris. What's not to like? This is a farmer, an educator, a command sergeant major, led his high school football team to the state championship in 1999 while simultaneously being the faculty sponsor for the Gay-Straight Alliance. This is somebody who lives his values. This is somebody who's authentic. This is somebody who's a strong leader. And this is somebody who can speak to those Haley voters in the heartland that the Harris-Walz ticket are going to have to win over.
Crazy lefty, radical lefty, everyone's got to be trans, let the migrants run all over and get everything for free, just as bad as Harris. That's the way they want to paint him. Do you see him that way?
No, and they're going to have a really hard time because he's got a track record and because he has no airs about him. Unlike J.D. Vance, who is a MAGA shapeshifter, Tim Walz just is the uncle you look forward to seeing to at Thanksgiving. And he's got a track record of 12 years in Congress. He's got a track record of 6+ years as governor, navigating some very turbulent times. Voters know him, voters trust him, and now Americans are going to know and trust him.
All right, brother. You ready to have the conversation?
Always.
You think they didn't pick Shapiro because he's Jewish?
I think two things are true simultaneously, Chris. One is that the online left was applying a double standard to Josh Shapiro that was unfair and unacceptable. and antithetical to who we are as a Democratic Party. The other is, I don't think Kamala Harris listened to them. I don't think she was influenced by them. And the reason I think that is because she's a good person, number one, and because she's a good politician, number two. And good politicians don't run for president of Twitter. They run for president of the United States through 7 battleground states where Israel is not a top 10 voting issue. Cost of living, reproductive freedom, immigration. These are the voting issues, and these are what Kamala Harris is going to be talking about.
What box does Walz check that Josh Shapiro doesn't?
I don't think she had any bad choices. I think she could have chosen Shapiro, Walz, Buttigieg, Raimundo, Whitmer, Kelly. The Democratic Party has a deep bench of talent, and she could have chosen any one of them, and they would have been terrific.
I'll give you the bench.
Nominees and terrific vice presidents.
I'll give you the bench. It is a fiction that Democrats don't have a bench, and that's why they had Biden. They didn't want to let the bench get into the game, which is why they had kept Biden. But, what does Walz give you that Shapiro doesn't? You have to win Pennsylvania, okay? This guy is the governor, is usually the gateway, right, to a state if anyone's going to help you. What does Walz do for you that Shapiro didn't?
So, Chris, I think you're lending too much freight to what a VP pick actually does electorally at all. And actually, the grand history of presidential elections is that the evidence is neutral at best. The value of this pick is that this is Kamala Harris's opportunity to introduce herself to the American public. It's actually less about the pick himself and more about what the pick says about her, because relative to most big ticket, big party nominees at this point in election cycle, she's relatively unknown for obvious reasons. And so what she can go out there and say now is, hey, this election is about Donald Trump's past and his grievances about the past, or it's about your future. And me and Tim Walz have a track record of delivering to make people's futures better, whether it's reproductive freedom, whether it's cost of living, whether it's just returning normalcy and sanity to our highest offices. This is a Kamala Harris moment. This is not a Tim Walz moment.
Fair. I just wonder, and we'll keep talking about it, and we'll see how it plays out in the election. But if you're prosecuting the case against Trump, he picked Vance, who's an ass kisser. That's what he is, right? That's why he got picked. Imagine the contrast if she said, "I'm not doing what's safe. I'm doing what's right." And Shapiro, yeah, he's Jewish, he's aggressive on Israel, and he's the best pick for the country. And it's going to be a black woman and a Jewish man. And I would have, there would have been a nobility to that, but maybe not a practicality. We'll see how it plays out. Congressman, you are always welcome here. I'll give you the last word if you want it, and thank you for being with me tonight.
I appreciate you having me on, Chris. Not sure I accept your premise of the issue, but I appreciate the back and forth. I think you and I both know that regardless of who Kamala Harris chose as vice president, Donald Trump made the worst VP pick since Aaron Burr, and he's going to have to own that now since the next 4 months. You
know, there's a Leonard Skinner song, give me 3 steps, mister, give me 3 steps towards the door. Vance has taken 2 of them. And if this acidic attack line goes bad, they're going to throw him out the door because they're going to have to save Trump. All right, let me go, Congressman. Take care very much.
Take care.
I wanted to get that perspective in here, especially from a member of Congress who's also Jewish, because this is something that may not be being discussed, but it's being felt. All right? Dusty, we'll take a break. When we come back, I want to try out how I see it on 2 better minds. Chris Cillizza, Geraldo Rivera. All right? Let's see how they see it and how you see it coming up. And political analyst Chris Cillizza and NewsNation correspondent at large Geraldo Rivera. Let's look at this micro and macro. First, Cillizza, both of you, thank you for being here. Geraldo as well. On the plus-minus side, Cillizza, what does Walz do for the Democrats, and why do they believe they just took a step closer to the White House?
Well, I liked your question that you didn't get an answer to the congressman, which is what box does Tim Walz check that Josh Shapiro doesn't? Because I don't think there is an answer to that, candidly. What do they think? I think this is a lot of psychology. I think we forget that politicians are people. I think Kamala Harris spent the last 3.5 years feeling as though sort of Joe Biden and she didn't have a great relationship. Biden didn't really appreciate her. He stuck her with some sort of unsavory gigs, including the border. And she wanted someone in that role that she's played for the last 3.5 years who was going to be a partner, who was going to be supportive, who was focused on her and not himself. And so I guess it is, yes, he's from the Midwest. Yes, he has a good story. Yes, he's kind of like your favorite uncle or, your dad's friend who you always like to hang out with. I get all those things. I'm more of a brass tacks political guy, and I just look at Pennsylvania and think Shapiro helps more than Walz, period, end of story. But I really do think what it ultimately came down to is Shapiro is a little bit more of a politician. I thought his speech was terrific today, but he is a little bit more of a politician. Walz comes across as a little bit more of a regular guy, though he's been a politician for quite some time. And most importantly, it's about Kamala Harris for Tim Walz, and I think the Harris people were worried it was a little too much about Josh Shapiro for Josh Shapiro.
Geraldo, what role does his Israel position have in this? What role does his faith have in this, in your estimation?
As someone who lives it, Chris, I can tell you that it is, to our minds, impossible that his faith, his Jewish faith, did not determine the fact that Josh Shapiro was not selected as the vice president. With the anguish over Gaza and the hostages and the anti-Semitism that's spread malignantly, staining college campuses from coast to coast, to think that his religion was not center in the discussion of in the Kamala Harris camp on whether or not he would be selected. It is whatever they say. It is not true. It's impossible. Now, I will say that Walz impressed me deeply with his speech, and he was someone I did not have any particular notice of or regard for. Not that I had anything against him, but he was my least visible, least favorite of the potential VP picks. Shapiro as a pick would energize the Jewish community. Erica my wife has a very extensive network, online and on the phone. There was a rooting. Isn't this cool? Isn't this great? First, since you mentioned Joe Lieberman, 2000, but a real mensch, a real charismatic, sharp, tactical, competent, popular Jewish man. And then she picks a guy from a state that, in the grand scheme of things, is not as relevant to her getting elected as Pennsylvania is. So you had this confluence of not only was he Jewish, but he's good and Jewish. So it just bugs me, and I cannot help but think that the left wing of the Democratic Party played a role in sinking his candidacy, Chris.
All right. So, Chris, you play counsel to Geraldo on this, and this is the counterpoint. If Geraldo is right, then he would have never been considered the front runner, which Harris's people kept putting out there. And he wouldn't have gotten the attention because they knew he was Jewish from jump. And she's been hearing from that left flank from jump. So if they had that kind of swing, which I don't understand politically because they're not determining any of the outcomes that matter for the Democrats, who are they going to vote for? Trump? So they may not like this guy, but they're not going anywhere else. Maybe it is what Jake Auchincloss referred to, Jewish also from Massachusetts, Democrat, that Israel doesn't matter that much. That's not what it really was about. It's that there's more need for traction in the Midwest, and that's where Walz is, and that's what justifies it.
Well, my mother will be thrilled that you have elevated me to a law degree that I can serve as counsel, because she always wanted me to go to law school, and I became a journalist. So thank you for that. So I actually will disagree with your contention in good faith in this way. So I do think Shapiro was the favorite. I still think Shapiro makes the most sense, candidly, if you're trying to win the White House. Of course, they knew he was Jewish. That was not like breaking news. He didn't turn Jewish 3 days ago. But I think that they did Look, I'm kind of with Geraldo here. It's impossible to imagine that when you're trying to make a pick where you don't, the do no harm is sort of the essential element of it. It is impossible for me to think they didn't think, like, no one in the room was like, well, he's Jewish, and is it too much to have a black woman and a Jewish guy on the ticket? Like, that conversation had to have happened. I sort of disagree. Back to your opening monologue, Chris, I disagree with that line of thinking because, look, I remember people telling me America will never elect a black guy named Barack Hussein Obama. Well, I mean, look how that went, 330 plus electoral votes twice. So you don't know that it can be done until you do it, right? And you kind of be brave to do it. It's like my kid jumping off the 10-foot diving board. You know, he doesn't know he can do it until he jumps off. So I think that it had to play a factor. I don't know if it was the deciding factor. I'm sure a lot of things went into it, but it doesn't make sense to me otherwise because the guy is charismatic. The guy is from the state they need. You know, he's got all the other pieces.
Yeah. I got to jump. Geraldo, you told me when I got into this business with you over 25 years ago, don't say what they want you to say what's right. And I do have to wonder if the Democrats did what was safe here, and maybe it makes it more likely that they'll win, but it wasn't the good fight. It wasn't the good fight, as it would have been to say, yeah, we're putting a Jewish guy on the ballot. And yeah, we know the top of the ticket is a black woman. And we don't think that that's anti-American. We think it is American. But we'll see. Big brother, I appreciate you. Chris Cillizza, thank you as well. I appreciate you both for being with me in a historic moment. We'll talk again soon. Right, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Not even 24 hours since Harris announced her running mate Walz. And Vance is already getting in on it, and they're fighting. You know why? Because, my brothers and sisters, we have allowed these two parties to take us in a battle to the bottom. So, which team has a better plan to win at this point? We debate it next.
You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. Yale had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on. That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy.
All right. The teams are set. The crowds are going wild. So, which side has a better chance? Who has a better case? Let's ask Democratic State Senator from Michigan, Mallory McMorrow, and Joe Pollak, author of the new book, The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days, and Christopher Devine, author of the book, Do Running Mates Matter? So Devine came in here for you other two guys with this huge ass needle and popped my balloon of all my enthusiasm about the VP. So let me start with you, Devine. Walz, right pick for the Democrats, and if so, why?
Personal choice for every candidate. It's hard to evaluate from the inside. For instance, chemistry plays a role. Are they going to get along well and actually govern well during the campaign? But I have to say from the outside, Walz is a strong pick. And the main reason I say that is because the first test for one of these choices is credibility. Could people see this person as the vice president of the United States, potentially president next year? And Tim Walz was the only finalist, John Shapiro didn't have this, who was not only had served in the state government, but also in the federal government. He had experience as an executive, but also foreign policy experience, federal experience, serving in Congress. So he was strong in that regard. And I think voters are going to look at this as a serious pick by Kamala Harris, not some strategy to win an election, although I think it will help her in this way, but someone who says that she's serious about leading, that she could have good judgment and do a good job potentially as president.
Well, I like what Chris is saying, Mallory, but it's a little egalitarian. She better have made the pick because she's got a head towards winning, because that's what it's all about. You can't govern if you don't win. Do you believe Walz can stand up to Vance and the withering criticism that is going to come his way?
Look, I absolutely do. I think that a lot of people within the Democratic Party really started waking up to who Tim Walz is within the last few weeks. And the more you get to know him, the more you love him. This is a guy who could relaunch Car Talk if he wanted to. He can help you fix your Jeep. He can talk to you about football. He can play cornhole. And he's led on a lot of policies. Watching here in Michigan, we look at Minnesota as a neighboring state with a Democratic trifecta, and we're in awe sometimes of the things that they've been able to get done there with their narrow majority, like paid leave, which is something that we've been working on that I know is a priority for the vice president. And if I can, I want to go back a little bit to some of the earlier conversation, because my mom is a voter in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and I was talking to her last week about this, and Shapiro is incredible. But I can tell you, as a voter in a swing county, in a swing state, she was afraid of losing him. So I think that there's a huge opportunity with the fire that we saw coming from Josh Shapiro, united around this ticket to turn out Pennsylvania with Tim Walz, with the vice president, get everybody in Michigan on board. I think this is just a slam dunk of a party that has not been this united in a very long time.
So, Brother Pollack, it's been a minute. Good to see you. You guys are excited about this, too. You say these are a couple of crazy lefties. Kamala Harris showed you who she is by picking a guy who's just as left and then some. Oh, and by the way, she doesn't like Israel. That's what this pick means also. Why do you guys see advantage in this?
Well, conservatives believed that Donald Trump dodged a bullet in a figurative sense this time because they were much more reluctant to face Josh Shapiro in a general election, Pennsylvania being an important swing state, and Josh Shapiro being young, dynamic. You saw him on stage today. As you mentioned, he upstaged the two people on the ticket, and conservatives are glad to be facing Walz. Walz has a couple of problems. One of them is the state of Minnesota, and that state is losing residents. It has other problems like the 2020 riots, which began there. The mayor of Minneapolis blamed the governor for not preparing for the riots, for the violence. And then, of course, Kamala Harris solicited bail funds for people who were arrested during the riots. So you can expect that to come up over and over again. But Minnesota also lags behind the rest of the nation in economic growth. So there's not much that he's done for Minnesota economically and in terms of policy. And that's where I think the Trump campaign needs to focus, is on policy. Kamala Harris doesn't even have any policies on her website yet, more than 2 weeks into joining the race. The other problem he has, or really it's a more telling aspect of this choice, but he's not really the future of the Democratic Party. You can say what you like about J.D. Vance, but Trump sent a signal that in picking him, the Republican Party wants to stay a populist party, a party of the working class. And Tim Walz is not going to be a future contender for president. He's not going to run at the end of 4 years or 8 years. He's made that clear, according to reporting. So we're not really getting a picture of where the Democratic Party is going. I think he was chosen to pacify various different factions in the Democratic Party. There is, of course, the anti-Israel faction that did not want Josh Shapiro, and he doesn't offend them. He has good relations with Ilhan Omar and the Somali community in his state. So I think that he's really more of a coalition pick to keep the party together. That doesn't really reach out to independent voters who are really going to make the difference in this election.
Mallory, quick chance to respond. Do you believe that Walz is a little bit of a question mark?
Not at all. I mean, you look at, this is a guy who, in his past as a lifelong hunter, somebody who served in the military, is a veteran, had an A rating from the NRA. And through lived experience of raising kids and seeing the devastating impact of gun violence, has changed course and passed common sense gun safety measures that in a state like ours, neighboring Michigan, more than 75% of voters across the spectrum support measures like red flag laws, universal background checks to reduce the impact of gun violence. So I think the idea that he's some lefty is just factually incorrect. He was one of the most moderate members of Congress, consistently ranked as one of the most effective members of Congress, and is leading his state in a very similar way. So I think you look at somebody like him versus a J.D. Vance, who, was quoted nationally telling his kid to shut the hell up about Pikachu when he was getting the offer of being the vice presidential nominee. And you've got Tim Walz out there making some of the best videos I've ever seen with his daughter Hope about safe driving laws, about going to the state fair. I mean, you just see two very different ideas. You want to talk about the future. This is what family looks like to Democrats. And it's inclusive and it's welcoming and it's fun.
All right, Mallory, appreciate it. Brother Pollack, thank you very much. Divine, quick thing. If Shapiro is not Jewish, he's Christian, you think he becomes the VP nominee instead?
There's no way we can know. This is an internal process. There are so many things that could be part of the vet we don't know about. They might just not have confidence in the home state advantage, which I don't think they should have expected him to deliver the state. There's no way to know that factor was critical. And in fact, I suspect it was other things, including doubts about resting everything on the expectation of just winning Pennsylvania.
Appreciate each and all. Thank you very much for the conversation. To be continued. Let's go to break. When we come back, 3 minutes, 45 seconds. So, why do you care about what's happening in the Middle East? Well, I feel like this about Israel. Well, I feel like this about Gaza. What about Iran trying to kill our leaders? A Pakistani national, ties to Iran, arrested for trying to carry out assassinations against unnamed U.S. leaders. Sources close to the situation say Trump may have been one of them. Who's the guy? How'd they get him? What's the risk? Next. Conspiracy theories are effective because they take a little bit of what's true and then twist it to convenience. The assassination attempt against Donald Trump was not a one-off. But it wasn't because it was Biden or the deep state or this lefty boogeyman. Whoever's telling you that stuff is just trying to get clicks, get more followers by scaring about you about the other side. It's about Iran. It's about their proxies. A day before Trump was shot in the head in Pennsylvania, a Pakistani national with alleged ties to Iran was arrested, charged with plotting to carry out political assassinations against U.S. leaders, which could have included Trump. I'm not saying he was part of the Butler thing. He'd already been arrested. But this is the threat. 46-year-old Asif Merchant arrived in the U.S. in April. His plan? Recruit numerous people, do three things: steal documents and USB drives from a victim's home, plan protests at rallies, carry out assassinations. Merchant said the plan would be ongoing, not just a one-time opportunity. So how'd they get him? Merchant had contacted someone he thought would help him, but instead they went to law enforcement and became a confidential source. Is this guy a one-off? Is he just a dope? Is he lying? Or is this the enemy we should be worried about, not each other? NewsNation Law and Justice contributor, former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, NewsNation National Security contributor, former CIA and FBI Special Agent Tracy Walder. Thank you both. Tracy, this guy, what is the chance that he's a wacko? What is the chance that he is a wake-up call that we have to start pointing the fingers in the right direction of real threats to our leaders?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Chris. I could not agree with you more. And I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall most of the time about Iran. Iran is the issue here, 100%. I sat at CIA headquarters before, during, and after September 11th, and Iran has always been a problem. However, we really have turned a blind eye. And if we look at this individual, Marchand, and how he came into the United States, he didn't come from Iran. Iran was smart enough to know not to send someone from their country. He actually transited through Istanbul, which is not a country that would have raised our radars. And so we really need to start thinking about this type of enemy and this kind of one-off attack that they're doing.
I know that we've gotten so good on the intelligence side, Jennifer, but it does feel like we get lucky almost every time that we catch one of these guys, where like the person he went to decided to go to law enforcement. It just seems so easy to get in here and do bad things.
It is easy, Chris. And fortunately, Iran and these sorts of attacks are the number one priority of the FBI. And I think that is in large part why so many of these are foiled, so many that the public doesn't even see. In this case, though, I do agree. And in many cases, I'd rather be lucky than good when doing law enforcement because we got lucky on this one.
Fair point. But Tracy, aren't you a little surprised that nobody's hit us in any kind of real way, especially with what's going on in the Middle East now, right? It had calmed down because we left the region, right? So we weren't messing with the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and now every other acronym you want to come up with in their control of their local populations. But now that you know you've got the head of the snake looking at you, isn't it just a matter of time?
I've actually said that before and have gotten a lot of heat for that. I do think it's a matter of time, and I am surprised that no one, I think people have tried to hit us. I don't think anyone has successfully hit us. And I completely agree with Jennifer in that we got very, very lucky in this case. What's surprising to me, and I think part of why maybe it hasn't been successful, which is a good thing, if we think about the lead up to 9/11 and the deterioration of communication between the FBI and the CIA, the 9/11 Commission did a lot to fix that, a lot of good to fix that. And part of me wonders if that is helping in terms of thwarting some of these attacks, because when I looked at the indictment, a lot of their operational security has not changed since the pre-9/11 days.
Tracy, Jennifer, thank you both for the perspective and the straight talk. Appreciate it. Jennifer Coffindaffer, Tracy Walder. To be continued. 4 minutes and 45 seconds. When we come back, final thought. A little bit of a surprise. Safe. You want to be safe. Always? You're running to first base. You want to beat the throw. Why? You want to be safe. So you get on base. Give yourself a chance to score. You have valuable things. You're afraid someone's going to steal them. Where do you put them? Put them in a safe. When you're sending your kids out, you have a daughter. You tell her, watch out. Don't let anybody put anything in your drink. Why? You want her to be safe. You want to protect yourself from risk. You want to manage risk. But what about when the risk is something wrong? Now, you could say, well, the risk is always wrong if it's about a danger, someone trying to hurt me. But then what do you do in those moments? That's what I'm struggling with when I think about the Democrats' choice. I'm not holding Kamala Harris to a different standard than Donald Trump. We didn't scrutinize his choice this way. Why not? Because we knew he was going to pick a lackey. That's what he's about. He's not about fighting the good fight. He's about grievance and division. And there are a lot of people that have an appetite for that in this country. And I believe this is his race to lose because of where we are as a country and how much disaffection, desperation, and anger there is. But I also believe that America can't give in to her worst instincts. And if one of those is, whoa, a black woman